Hello, everyone. Good to see you here today. In the gate, we've actually seen God do some really amazing things in the past few months. Some other churches like Abbey, which I can see is represented here, will probably say something similar. And just seeing God, what I would say, supernaturally grow our church. He's just orchestrated the growth, and it's just been wonderful. A year ago, we had a tiny little church community over there. There was 14 people. That's 14 people in the church, and we were about to pioneer a new community. And we had a handful of Hong Kong people come and join us in the August of last year. And then we participated in a local fete, which was just opposite the church. And some Hong Kong people came to chat to us, and to some of the Hong Kong people that we had already asked to help us at the fete. Within a couple of weeks of arriving in the church, we put them to work, which was, it was lovely. They wanted to be involved. And so some more Hong Kong people came to talk to those Hong Kongers that they recognised at the fete and talked to us, and then they started to come to church. And then the next weekend we had the official launch, and a few more Hong Kongers came to join us there as well. We had a lovely hog roast in the park and some games, and they joined in, and it was wonderful. And from there on, week after week, we have seen more and more Hong Kong people join us, and other nations as well. It's not just Hong Kong, but as Yinka said earlier, we have about 130 now who are from Hong Kong. That includes the children and includes the young people, but overall about 130 people that are sticking with us and joining in. We see some of them are starting to tithe. They are starting to speak and to share at events, to lead worship. Some are being trained up into leadership, and Yinka will probably share more about that later. But more importantly, they are seeing us as family, and we are family, and that's really important. We all make up the family of God, but they feel that they are part of us, and we feel that together we are a family. We've worked really hard to make our Hong Kong friends feel loved and accepted. And we've tried to understand their culture and our differences by doing our own research. We've also utilised the information supplied by UK Hong Kong Welcome Churches. That's been very useful. But we have encouraged them to integrate as much as possible with the British people and those from other nations as well, rather than having their own group. And I know that Yinka will speak into that as well later on. One of the ways that we have encouraged them to integrate is actually get them serving as quickly as possible. And from the beginning, we made sure that each Hong Kong family had a visit. So we have a pastoral team, and we would make sure that they each were visited as soon as we could. We could get to know them, get to know who they are, what they're about, get to know what they've done in previous churches, or indeed if they were even Christian, because actually some of the Hong Kong people were not Christian when they first joined us, but they came to make friends. That's okay. They're still in church. They're hearing the word. They're hearing the gospel. That's wonderful. And what we would do when we were on this visit, we would identify what their skills were, how they've served previously, if they'd served previously, and we would encourage them then to start serving in our church. And that was really good for them, because it helped them to build relationships and to feel that they were part of something, and that was really key and really important. And of course, we also offered and still offer ongoing pastoral support to those that need it. And we'd invite families for meals or barbecues to our own homes. That's really important, all for helping to build relationship. And actually, Yinka will testify as well, we would we're often get invited round to their homes too and get fed amazing food. So my waistline has definitely been expanding in the last year. So, but no, it's just lovely. And we really found that food was just an excellent way to encourage people to gather. So we have a twice monthly meal all together, which is just really important. It includes the preach, includes worship. And some of our Hong Kong brothers and sisters are now taking it in turns to actually share the word on those evenings, which is just wonderful. And we also felt it was really important that they understood that we are standing with them through what the Hong Kong people have been through in having to leave their country. So the ministerial, so Pastor Yinka, Pastor Mabel, myself, we went with about 50 of our Hong Kongers to go and see the film Revolution of Our Times. And then we had an opportunity afterwards just to hear their stories, and just to share some of the pain that they have experienced through that. And I think that was really important. And off the back of that, we felt it was really important that their voice was heard. So we held an evening where we had a few Hong Kong people speak and share their personal experiences of what had happened in Hong Kong to them, what they had seen, what they had gone through. And we invited people from the local church community to come and hear those stories. And we just felt that was a really important evening for them, just to know that they were listened to, know that they were heard. And of course, it gave us a greater understanding of what they had been through. Also, we celebrated Chinese New Year with them. And that was a really lovely evening. Again, it gave them a chance to celebrate their culture, but in a new culture, a new setting. And that was just wonderful. We had various members of the Hong Kong community who shared with us during that evening. And of course, it was another opportunity to enjoy the wonderful food and the wonderful company. So that was really good. And we had lots of people come from the local church community, and British people come to that, which was just great. It was obviously really important that they understood what was being preached on a Sunday morning. So we didn't want to start our own church, which was just for Hong Kong. We wanted to make sure that they could integrate on a Sunday morning into what we were doing on a church service. So we bought translation devices, and then we managed to get a team of Hong Kong people that were proficient enough in the English language and would feel confident enough to be able to translate what the preacher was saying. So we still have that ongoing now. Every Sunday we have a different Hong Kong person translating for those that need the translation. And also we make sure on the screen that the scriptures are up in both English and in Cantonese as well, so they can keep up with what's being shared. And that's worked really, really well. We also adjusted our teaching materials on a Sunday just to cater for our Hong Kongers, because we realized that a number of them hadn't actually had foundational teaching. So we've gone right back to the foundations of the faith, and we are going through that as a teaching series, so that everybody is on the same page, and then we will of course hope to build from that as time goes on. But we're getting feedback, they're finding it really helpful. We're actually seeing lives changed because of some of the teaching we've had, particularly on the Holy Spirit, for example. And it's just lovely hearing their testimonies. One of our Hong Kong brothers just shared on Sunday in church to the whole church about how he's understanding more about the Holy Spirit, And it was just, really beautiful to hear how that teaching is impacting him and other people as well, and to hear him sharing that with his peers, because that's most important, that they hear from their peers how it's changing them. So that's really good. We're also adjusted what we're doing in our connect groups, which is our small groups, again to accommodate. When we have plans afoot actually to add in some different connect groups that suits a bit more to the Hong Kong culture as well. So that's something that we're looking at the moment, but that won't be exclusive of other people. We're going to make sure that all nations will be welcome at every group, and that's really important. Quite early on, we identified some key individuals from our Hong Kong community who would be able to help us rally the other Hong Kongers to join in all the events that we were going to be doing as a church. And they just helped to contact people and make sure they were aware of what was going on, really helped us with any language barriers that we might have had. And they were really, really important to us to help with communication and help to explain what was happening. Some of these people we have actually trained up into different leadership roles, and they are starting to step out into these roles already, which is just really exciting. We've also encouraged families to enable their young people to be involved in our youth group, which launched recently on a Sunday and during the week, and also to encourage them to go away on the youth weekends and other activities that have been going on. Now, I think we were asked to talk about our failures as well as our successes. So I think that there is one thing, sadly, which we weren't able to get right initially, because we were and still are a new community, and we didn't have everything up and running and established like a long-term church might. So when the Hong Kong people joined us, I know that we did lose a few families initially because we couldn't supply children's work for the very young children, so children below 4 years old, so sort of creche age. But we are putting that right because a creche is about to be launched, so that's really exciting. And also, I know that because we didn't have the capacity or the volunteers, we couldn't split age groups in kids' work, so not everyone was comfortable with that. But we're still working on that one as well. But those are the things that we know that we need to work through, and God is giving us the solutions, which is great. On the positive side, as I mentioned earlier, we do encourage everyone to serve in some capacity. So very quickly we were able to get, to discover that we had some nursery workers or teachers or people that had previously taught Sunday school in Hong Kong. And so we have very quickly been able to include them in the children's work and in the youth work, going on the teams and serving on there, which is wonderful. Also, there have been other ministries where we have managed to encourage Hong Kong people to serve, such as our toddler group and our worship. So it's been fabulous on a Sunday morning to see our Hong Kong family actually at the front helping to lead the worship, and that's just been amazing. And it's really good for those in the congregation to look and to see their brothers and sisters in those sort of roles, really important, and for the children and youth to see that as well, really important. But also, it doesn't just help us when they serve, it also helps them, because it it helps them to build experience here, even though it's on a voluntary level, but it all helps to go on their CVs for when they're looking for jobs. Obviously, it helps them to improve their English as they're working alongside local people. A case in point, and very, very obvious one, is our toddler group. We've got about 25 British families that come to the toddler group, and we have Hong Kong volunteers there who are helping, and so they get lots of opportunity to practice their English, and that is just wonderful, really, really good. We also have something called English language lessons, and we have TEFL, which is teaching English as a foreign language. We have TEFL qualified teachers who teach that, and it happens each week, and it actually includes some Hong Kongers that are not Christians, and that is wonderful, because they get a portion of Bible study each week as part of the lessons. And so they are learning the Bible. So whether or not they've accepted Jesus, they are still getting some Bible scripture, which is just wonderful. And then there's always an opportunity to pray afterwards. So they're being prayed for. So it's just fabulous. And what happens when they arrive? They have to do an assessment when they come for the first time. And then they're put in a different class according to their English language ability. And we found it's a really thriving ministry. It's just wonderful, really well populated. And we also have an outreach each term. And in fact, the last outreach we had coincided with the Queen's Jubilee. And that was a really lovely time. We had some people come that wouldn't normally come, and they got to hear the gospel, which is really good. And there was just some fun and some games, and of course some food. So yes, it was good. And it was actually British food. It was some scones and sandwiches and things like that they got to enjoy. So it was all good. We also ran a very well attended CV workshop, which covered a number of different topics. One of them was integration. We also looked at the job market, and we had different speakers come in to talk about all these different elements. We had CV writing, that was another topic that was talked about, and interview techniques. And that worked really well. And then afterwards, we matched up people who in the church who were in similar careers to those that were looking for the jobs, to give them ongoing spiritual and practical support to help them to get a job. And since then, many have received jobs, and we've celebrated with them as a church. It's been wonderful to hear them get up on a Sunday morning and testify to the jobs that they have got, that God has given them, and for the church to celebrate with them. And that's just been great. And I've had the pleasure of writing quite a few references for them. So it's just lovely seeing what God is doing for them. And just to finish, I want to tell you about one of our most successful initiatives that we have been running, which is something called Adopt a Family. And with this, local families have adopted a Hong Kong family for a period of 6 months. That's what we've given them, to help them with practical and spiritual support. So various local families have been involved in this, and through this, they've offered help with house buying, information about schools and support around that, parenting advice, all sorts of practical support, but also prayer, meals together, and friendship, and just helping them to feel part of something. And that's been really important. So I would love just to share with you some of the feedback that we've had, just to finish off before I hand over to Yinka. And it's just from 2 families that have been involved in this Adopt a Family scheme. So one will be the British family, that will be the feedback from them, and then the Hong Kong family that have been adopted. Okay. Now, as you will see from what they have said, we cannot guarantee a perfect match. And I've asked them to be honest with the feedback, what worked, what didn't work. But we do try and pair up those who have similar family units, or pair up those that we know need support in a particular area. So just an example of that, we have a couple who are from Hong Kong who are struggling with how to parent their children well. So we have a local family who run a parenting course within the church. So we have paired those 2 couples together. But that's not the family I'm going to share with you today. I'm going to share some feedback from another couple of families. So please forgive me, I'm going to be reading this piece of paper, but this is what their feedback is. So firstly, the British couple's perspective. We have enjoyed engaging and supporting R, J and family. I won't give their actual names if you don't mind, I'll just do the initials. We have had several meals together and enjoyed and shared lots of different food and shared advice on good days out around Reading shops, etc. They were keen to find a good roller coaster venue, so Thorpe Park was recommended. I was able to help Jay around avoiding paying emergency tax when she started work, and was able to give good advice on job hunting and using key websites to help look for work. I'd say the only frustration has not been being able to help R in his search for taxi or buyer work. My lack of knowledge in these industries has meant I was not able to offer any help in his search for work. So that's their perspective, but it's quite interesting to hear our Hong Kong family's perspective. So the Hong Kong family. R and I, together with our 2 kids, arrived in the UK on the 13th of January 2022. In 3 days' time, we went to the Gate Sindlesham with our cousins, where pastors Joanna and Mabel were so welcoming and keen to have a home visit with us in the next week. Over our conversation, Joanna invited us to join an adopted family and later connected us with the Dearest family. We have a lot in common with the British couple. Like me, the wife and I have the same birth year. So this is the lady writing this. We both have 1 boy and 1 girl in similar ages. Also, we are all animal lovers. The British couple treated us to dinner at their place, and in return, we offered them to come over for Hong Kong style dinner. We shared our favourite food, and we found that the wife is an expert in making sweet desserts. Yummy. When we talked about job hunting, the husband was so generous to share his CV and useful websites, and he told us what to talk about during interviews. And more important than anything, they prayed for us. I got my job within a month, praise the Lord. I still remembered their reactions, and they messaged me, 1 down, 1 to go, meaning they will keep praying for R to have a job too. They are so helpful and considerate. When our family suffered from COVID, the wife, as a professional nurse, recommended effective medicines to us. And when we needed referral for an NHS dentist, they even helped us call for registration. We were moved by them and all the things they've done for us unconditionally. To talk about the negative part, I must say, is the location. If we live closer together, we could see each other more often. Isn't it lovely that they want to see each other more often, though? We could all go to the same church in Sindlesham and could see each other every Sunday. Now, that reference is because we as a church, we have 3 church sites, 2 of which have congregations meeting in them. And the British couple happen to go to the Gate Central, which is in Reading, and the Hong Kong couple go to the Gate Sindlesham. But that's okay. They are getting over the barriers. It's all right. So just to finish off what she says, taking the opportunity, we would love to say thank you to the Gate for accepting Hong Kong people. You have done so much for us and are willing to understand our situation and difficulties and help us settle down in the UK and introduce us to so many lovely brothers and sisters. They are like angels. Thank you. How great it is for being part of the Gate. Thank you, our Father God in Christ. There you go. So that was, it's lovely for us to get that sort of feedback, because it shows us that it's worth the work that it takes to get this set up, and it's worth it for them because they have such a good experience and they feel welcomed and loved, and that's what's most important. So I'm going to hand over to Yinka now, who is going to tell about future plans.
Is that okay, Sharon? Would you like us to continue? Or? Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Joanna. It's great being part of a team of very dedicated individuals who really just love people. And there's a number of things I just want to highlight and point out that are really important in terms of ensuring that Hong Kong people are welcomed. And this is from a leadership point of view. So Mabel's spoken about the practical.
Joanna.
Joanna's spoken about the practical, some of the practical things that we've implemented, some which we had to learn on the hoof. We had to learn as we went along, and some of which were natural to us already in terms of culture. But so I want to share 3 key points and just, from a leadership point of view, if you want to really get this right. The first one is culture. It's really important for the indigenous church that's welcoming Hong Kongers to recognize that there will be cultural differences, and the cultural differences will, you need to have a generous spirit and a generous heart. Because culture isn't wrong. There's nothing wrong with culture. It's only ever behaviors that are wrong. Culture should be celebrated and it's enjoyed. And my favorite Sunday morning is when I have to go to Sindlesham and preach, because on the first Sunday of every month we have a meal. We all eat together, and the Hong Kong food is delicious. It's amazing. So the culture is really critically important to understand that Hong Kong people are having to learn about that the British culture is not what they've seen on television. It's actually very different to what they've seen. This is not a Christian country in a sense that they've come to. It's very, if you like, very much post-Christian, really. And so they're having to learn even just a language, even though they all speak English mainly or understand English, they've maybe not practiced it or had to practice it as much. So it doesn't take much. So some of the practical things that you heard there from Joanna about an English learning class, that will help you bring more Hong Kongers in if your church can provide that. Very practical. But it also helps them with the culture. You get to understand another culture, and they get to understand you. And so for us, I had to help our folk understand that there's nothing wrong with celebrating the Chinese New Year. Okay, because some of them were thinking, what are we celebrating? Is this a Christian thing, or is it not a Christian thing? What are we bringing in? Is it spiritually significant? And we had to help folk understand, no, it's not, nothing wrong with celebrating New Year just because somebody has an arbitrary date in the calendar. So we're having to coach everybody to be generous. Mistakes of the past, leaders need to understand this, that when Black people came in from Jamaica in the 60s and 70s, they were not welcome into white churches. And that meant that a lot of Black churches started up their own church. Because, you know, I remember one, the guy who started up the Afro-Caribbean Evangelical Alliance in the UK, Philip Mohabir. I remember he told me, he said, when he arrived from Guyana, so he is a Guyanan, an Indian background extract, Guyanese. Guyana is when he came over here, he said he went to church thinking, great, I'm in a Christian country, and they said to him at the door, we don't have your kind of people here. So they sent him. So they had to start up their own churches. And that's a mistake of the past. I think the British church, and we as Baptists, I'm so glad for Sharon. Sharon's been to help us in Reading. Sharon's spoken in our church. It was very helpful to have Sharon come and encourage us, and she's been to other churches in Reading as well. Very encouraging that the Baptists have stepped up and said, no, we are welcoming Hong Kong people into this country. And that's a wonderful thing that the Baptist Union has done. Why? Because we're not making the mistakes of the past. But this is important for leaders to really hear this, that you have to be intentional about welcoming Hong Kong people. It's not just, come to our church, we meet at 11 o'clock, and, you have to be intentional. In that intentionality, I think leaders need to understand that as folk are coming in, Hong Kongers are coming in, what you're trying to do is build community. That's what we're all about. That's what we're all trying to do. But there are no shortcuts. So if you want to build community, you have to find people who are going to be faithful to the community. So Hong Kongers are no different to anybody else. You get faithful Hong Kongers, you get unfaithful Hong Kongers, you get distracted Hong Kongers, you get focused Hong Kongers. They're the same as everybody else. So if you're going to build community, you have to be absolutely focused. Who is faithful? Who are the faithful Hong Kongers? Who are the ones that are already looking after the people? Who are the ones that are already visiting people? Who are the ones that are already helping? Who are the faithful Hong Kongers? You mustn't let go of your principles because you're trying to be helpful. Okay? So you're trying to help people, you're trying to love people, but you must remember the people you set up, if you like, in leadership, if they're not faithful, that's the pattern you're setting for your whole church, not just the new community coming in. So culture is the first thing, is you have to focus this culture and explain it, because you're going to get cultural events happening which folk are going to not understand, and you have to take the time to explain it. The second one is investment. If the leadership of any church that wants to welcome Hong Kong people must invest. We have invested 2 pastors who are working into the Sindlesham context, and whose main job it is, so Joanna's one of them, the other one's Mabel, whose main job is to visit every Hong Konger that comes to our church and to love them and pastor them. And now Joanna also has to preach, and she also has to prepare groups and everything else that she has to do. But we've invested in the Hong Kongers because we believe God has sent them to this nation to make this nation better. And I'll come to that in a minute. So the second one is investment. Investment means time. If the leaders of the church are not invested in welcoming Hong Kong people, it's going to be much harder, okay? It's going to be much harder. So you can't delegate love out. You've got to love people yourself. And if the leaders are loving the people coming in and then demonstrating by the way they're living their lives that they're loving Hong Kong people, so it's time, it's an investment. You've got to invest in this incoming community. And then the third thing I want to say is the dream. Hong Kong people are among the most educated on the planet. They're amongst the most aspirational. They are incredibly ingenious, inventive people, extraordinarily clever. Their kids coming into our schools will fly through the exam system because they're so much more advanced. Okay, and that's that's just a reality. Okay, if we thought Asian kids did really well at school, which has always been the case, Hong Kongers coming in from Hong Kong are coming in at a high level of education. So, and their parents usually of the first wave of Hong Kongers coming across have usually had high profile jobs, very competent people, very able people. It is imperative and important that we keep their dreams alive in their hearts, that we encourage them to keep on dreaming about their future. So there's a meta narrative that you must think about if you're a leader of a church and you're wanting to welcome Hong Kong people, that these are people who've spent their whole life dreaming about inventing, creating, doing amazing things in a culture that's steeped in inventiveness and creativity. So encouraging the dream that they've got in their hearts is really important. What we've been trying to do, given the fact that the culture is very cautious. So Hong Kong culture, Hong Kong people are very cautious. They will take a long time to make decisions because they want to be sure. Okay, but in the meantime, we that third aspect, trying to keep the dreams alive, encourage them. I've kept on telling them, reminding them, why did God bring them to this country? Why has God brought them to this nation? It's because he wants to bless this nation, and therefore encouraging them to be self-reflective about their destiny, their future, and how church fits into that. What is their role in church? What should they be doing with church? How should they be serving in church? And it's actually worked, because as Joanna said, we've got people in the worship team, youth work, doing the PA at the back. There's several of them now. I mean, it's just amazing. It's keeping the dream alive for them, that actually they're not just here just to retire and give up on their life. They're here to make this country better too. And so we've got the first couple that have been trained up in leadership. And when we say leadership, we're not saying leadership in the Hong Kong people, because I don't think that's good. We're saying leadership for the whole church. So the people we've trained up, we're saying now you're going to be leaders across our whole church. So if you're stepping up into leadership, you need to understand it's not just for Hong Kong people. We want integration. We don't want to make the mistakes of the past. We want absolute integration. Now, I know some people are going for segregation. That's fine. But for us, we feel it's really important from day one. And the reason for this is this. A mistake of the past that some of our churches have made when Black churches came over here. So they started their own churches. These churches are among the biggest in any city you go to in the UK, okay? Black churches, big churches all over the country. But their kids have gone to university with an indigenous population. They've gone to school with an indigenous population. The culture is an indigenous culture. So whilst when they go home or they go to church, it's an African culture, when they go outside of the front door of their house, they're in the normal culture. Now, when they become Christians and they want to invite their friends to church, they know their friends aren't going to come to a Black church because it's not their culture. So there are ministries that cater for, if you like, young adults that have grown exponentially, partly with the next generation of immigrants from from places like Jamaica and Africa, etc., who have now gone to these other groups because they can invite their friends to it. So they've left the indigenous churches. We don't want to make that mistake again. We want it to be the case that when these kids grow up in our churches, they think they can invite their friends because their friends will recognize the culture they're coming into. So these are really important things that I want to really encourage. Again, this new couple that have done leadership training, I personally, along with Joanna and others, will invest time in them to make sure that they get the best of what we have as a leadership team, so that they can accelerate their leadership skills. Bearing in mind, they've already served back home in Hong Kong before they came here. So they've already got a number of skills. So just to recap, leadership needs to face into culture. If you want to make sure that, you're going to have to explain the culture because this is going to happen, okay? It's going to happen. And you need to explain the culture both ways. we had a light party. One of the things we did in Reading was we had a children's party, and we made a mistake. We put superheroes. So the children's worker put superheroes, and they put Jesus as a superhero. And Hong Kongers said they were horrified. Oh, you can't do this. You can't. Jesus isn't the superhero. Those are all make believe. You're making it. And so we had to learn that actually we need to be careful about our culture. You know, what's acceptable here, we need to be careful. How does it translate into Hong Kong culture? We need to be really careful that they can understand that if it's going to cause offense and not help, we need to be careful. And that works in both directions. Culture, leadership need to take their time to understand it and not just react and say, well, we have Superman and there's nothing wrong with it, so there. No. We need to take time to listen to what's going to help people integrate. But also we need to explain ourselves. Secondly, investment. If the leadership of your church are serious about this, they have to invest pastoral time. All the Hong Kongers are coming in with so many needs that unless you got somebody dedicated to loving them, it's going to be hard to integrate. And then thirdly, keeping the dreams alive in their hearts. And part of that for us, for Joanna and myself, is we want them to see that in the leadership of this church, whether it's worship, youth work, Hong Kong people are there as well, leading, just like anybody else, because that tells the kids they've got a future in leadership in the church. They've got a future, they can serve, they can make a difference in the UK. That their parents, wow, look, their parents are leading. So we've got an event later on in the year that we're going to be doing, which one of the Hong Kongers is going to be doing the gospel message. I'm very excited about this, very excited. And the Hong Konger is going to be bringing the gospel message. Very, very excited about this. So we're creating a culture, a context in which culture is understood, time is invested, and dreams are kept alive. So I hope that helps with my 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Yinka's and Joanna's sharing. Is really practical, and I learned a lot from your sharing. And I like your points that we have to investment in the leadership. We have to learn the culture. We have to take time to encourage them. And also I love the points that we have to celebrate for life that Joanna sharing. We are not only share faith, we are sharing life in Jesus, and it's worth to celebrate with each other. It's really great. Thank you very much for your doing what you are doing and your sharing. Thank you very much. And so for now it's time for Walter. Walter Wong is a Hong Kong pastor, Hong Kong minister. And he has so much experience in the UK. So it's time for Walter.
Okay, let me share a screen, PowerPoint for easier to communicate, if you don't mind. Can everybody here looks at the PowerPoint? Okay. So thanks the Baptist Union UK, thanks the Hong Kong Response Project, and thanks Sharon for invitation as a speaker to share the experience of Hong Kong Welcoming Church. I may not say this is a success case study, but it is only an experience sharing. So I'm born in Hong Kong. Life is like a journey. I cannot imagine with my wife in our beginning of our 50s years old to start a new journey in UK when we are already so get used to our home country, Hong Kong. So we didn't imagine in that age with a good work profession, me as a software engineer for 10 years and then as a pastor, minister, and my wife is a social worker. So we have a good work and serving in Hong Kong families and all the relationships. But we have to uproot ourselves since, as you may read news from the BBC, since 2019, what's happening in Hong Kong. We also born in the time when the UK has a sovereignty in Hong Kong. As you may know, we also drive our car, with the driver on the right-hand side, exactly the same in UK. But this is not the case in maybe 20 miles away, across the border into the mainland China. It's already a very big difference as a Hong Kong, different from where now we have returned to the country. So I'm serving in the Baptist Church for, I graduated in the Baptist Seminary in 14 years ago. So halfly I served in the church, and halfly in the later 7 years, I served as a Christian organization to integrating faith into our work. So to help Christians to be a 24 hours Christian, as a disciple of God in every time, every day, and everywhere. And this is where our challenge is when we move away from Hong Kong to UK, a place that we are not familiar with. Are we still a disciple of God, of Jesus? This is one of our questions. So let me share with you 3 things about what in the past nearly 1 year, the setting up the born of a Hong Kong fellowship in a local church. And the second is I will describe a bit what is or who is a Hong Kong Christian today. Maybe I share from my personal point of view. And thirdly, how my family settled in UK and how my spiritual way. So first, before I fly over to UK from Hong Kong, I'm a preacher, a pastor, and a serving in a Christian organization. And what happens 3 years ago? So you can see this picture is the places in the Victoria Park in Hong Kong. So we used it to celebrate, no, not celebrate, or maybe we have sport here and we celebrate here, and we also remember Tiananmen Square, the June 4th event as well here in 1989. So you can see that after last year, in 2020, when the national law applies in Hong Kong, after that, we no longer be able to remember the event in Hong Kong for the June 4th already. So this picture is grabbed from the internet. It's talking about 1 million, more than 1 million Hong Kong people. 3 years ago, we stepped up together. We walked out protest peacefully in a heavy rain, like Hong Kong. These few days, there's a storm coming to Hong Kong. Every umbrella, colorful umbrella, there is one voice, wishing for a democracy, wishing for freedom, wishing just to keep going what the good system already has in Hong Kong. Just want to maintain it. But you know the reason why there are over 120,000 BNO applications to UK in this just less than 2 years, because most of us were very disappointed, and most of us are in a grieving. We are in a loss. We are very unhappy, and we have to uproot our whole family. We have to separate from our parents. We have to separate from our grandparents, and we have to uproot from our jobs, our career, and our serving. All things we have to uproot. And that's why you can see this English word. You can read, or in your heart, it is a translate. We call it 香港人加油. You can read it in your heart. So it's a word, it's a phonics translation. So one more information for you that we cannot even use the word Hong Kongers now in Hong Kong. This term is forbidden. We cannot use Hong Kongers, this word in Hong Kong. Okay, maybe I go to another slide. That's why most of us go to the airport, leave our home country. Sadly, and missing, and we leave Hong Kong, and when we come here. And so finally, me and my wife settled in one of the cities that most of the Hong Kong family choose. Is one of it. Tends to be quite mature. Most of us are over 40, 50s, with their kids in their teenagers or before the university. So as I have heard from Joanna and Yinka, or maybe other churches, some of them can accommodate or absorb some of the young adults from Hong Kong. And this is not the case in the church I'm staying. So I think there is something happening that maybe we don't know yet. And I was told that some of the young adults who are quite actively in the previous few years in Hong Kong, the movement may not join typical normal churches in UK. They may gather themselves together, or maybe leading by some of the pastors who also come from Hong Kong, as far as I know. So whoever joining the, I would say, normal, typical UK churches, maybe some of those Christian or family who are already seeking a new life, who is quite a normal, stable, peacefully church life, and aiming to settle more. So I would say a term's called we want to integrate, but also with some cohesion, integration and cohesion. There is a tension in our heart. We want to integrate, but cannot be so quick, but we want some cohesion. We want the same language, same culture together. I think it's a transition period. And so let me see. When we heard what Joanna says, we want the adoption of family. Wow, it's a very, very creative and very inventive term. That I think it's very, very good. We experience this kind of accommodating, but it is not from a program, not from maybe some member who is very keen to, with a loving heart, and they serve and they invite us to their home, and it's really, really impressed us. It's a very strong impression for us to invite us to their home, to have a tea, have a coffee, have a lunch, even just have a long chat, frankly, open our heart. We heard a lot of story about this. And I'm very excited to know that when the church has invested pastor, full-time pastor to serve. I want to share with you that up to now, I'm a volunteer in the church, and I'm asking God whether he asking me, our family, to serve as a full-time here or not, and I'm ready to serve, ready to be a staff, ready to be, yeah. So I'm keep looking for God to guide us to anywhere that He leads us to serve as a full-time or part-time. So it's fascinating to hear that it's very important that church has investment, because it is not just welcome is an attitude, but as you can foresee that this kind of Hong Kong family they come with a lot of practical need. They need time, they need resources, they need a lot of things. So I think it's a very good, and very good things to know that. Yeah. So I may end up here now.